Hello everyone, back tuning into our latest Star Wars video. So we did a video a few days ago talking about the news that John Campea was breaking on his YouTube channel about Rian Johnson's Star Wars trilogy being cancelled by Disney and Lucasfilm. There was no direct confirmation of that from Disney and Lucasfilm. It's just a rumour that John Campea was breaking at the time. Had a little bit more information on that though from Bob Iger, CEO of Disney. So it really does appear like, he doesn't go as far as to say Rian Johnson's trilogy is cancelled, but it definitely now is confirmed that the Benioff and Weiss trilogy is going to be the next set of films that are up starting in 2022, which is what John Campea was saying. That, of course, creates its own problems, or its own sort of concerns, because although Benioff and Weiss have created a very successful trilogy, a very successful series, I should say, with Game of Thrones, things have gone rather wrong in its final season, season 8. That does raise concerns about their Star Wars trilogy. I'll come to that in the second part of the video, but let's start talking about what Bob Iger has said about the future of Star Wars. So if you are enjoying the Star Wars content on this channel, please, can you like, share, and subscribe? Let us know in the comments that you're enjoying what we're doing. So we're at Deadline.com. I'll leave a link to Deadline.com in the links page at YouTube. It says, in terms of headlines, Star Wars film future, Bob Iger confirms Game of Thrones duo helming next installment after franchise hiatus. So let's get into this one, and it begins. The next feature outing in the Star Wars franchise will be a new installment directed by Game of Thrones executive producers David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, Disney CEO Bob Iger confirmed. The company boss ended his appearance at an investor comment in New York with updates about the Star Wars universe. The entry by Benioff and Weiss was announced in February 2018, and last week Disney revealed 2022 as the target date for the next installment as part of a larger setting of overall film release dates. Iger also said another Star Wars streaming series would hit the Disney Plus streaming service, joining The Mandalorian and an untitled prequel to Rogue One before the release of the 2022 release of the Benioff and Weiss feature. Despite no lack of creative material, the company determined that taking a break after the upcoming release of the concluding 9th installment of the Star Wars saga, Rise of Skywalker, of course, would make sense, Iger said. And then it goes on a little bit more about that. So basically, Bob Iger has confirmed that the next set of films up in the cinema from 2022 and then going on to 2024 and 2026 is going to be the Benioff and Weiss trilogy of films that was announced back in 2018. We don't know what that trilogy of films is about. It's assumed because of their connection with Game of Thrones that it could be Knights of the Old Republic, but there has been no confirmation about that whatsoever. No mention, you'll notice, of Rian Johnson, but this is very much tying in with what John Campea was signalling on his YouTube channel last week, that Rian Johnson's trilogy is cancelled, it's not happening. Ryan may be some way involved with the Benioff and Weiss trilogy. We don't know that at the moment. Maybe he could direct the first one and have Benioff and Weiss overseeing him. We don't know how these 3 Benioff and Weiss films are going to be created, but certainly this is tying in with what John Campea said. It does look as though, it looks very, very grim for anybody waiting for a Rian Johnson trilogy, I have to say. Now, of course, this creates problems of its own, though, this story, because there is a huge backlash to what's happening in the final season, season 8, of Game of Thrones. Now, I've never watched Game of Thrones. I know it's a very successful series. But there has been a real backlash to what is going to be the final series of Game of Thrones. And so now we're at yahoo.com. And the headline is Backlash bruised after Game of Thrones showrunners confirmed for next Star Wars movie. So here we go, and Yahoo are reporting David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, the showrunners behind Game of Thrones, have been confirmed as the helmsman of the next Star Wars movie. Though he didn't go into details, Disney boss Bob Iger said the next movie that we release will be theirs, and we're not saying anything more about that. Benioff and Weiss will be writing and producing the movie. No word yet on who will direct. Maybe that's where Rian Johnson comes in. One of the three new Star Wars movies planned. And then he goes on. But there's already backlash brewing among disgruntled fans of the HBO fantasy series, which of course is Game of Thrones. Ever since Prepared took on the mantle of Game of Thrones after the action on screen overtook the source material in George R.R. Martin's books, the show's mostly untarnished record began to wane. It's been most noticeable in the two most recent seasons, with critics rounding on plot plausibility being stretched to its limits and careless rush pacing now prevalent. The most recent and final series of the show, airing at the moment and prepped for the series finale on Sunday night in the US, has been among the most criticised by previously enamoured fans of the show. As such, the internet appears to be aflame over what they'll do with Star Wars. There's loads of tweets showing up there. 3 more Star Wars movies are on way, as confirmed by Disney last week, the presumption being that they will form a new trilogy. Rian Johnson, who made The Last Jedi, is developing a separate trilogy of movies himself too, but those who dislike the entry into the Star Wars canon, that's The Last Jedi of course, have their own reservations too. Weiss and Benioff's movie will arrive in December 2022. So, we've got a few problems here with Benioff and Weiss. So, it's good news, I think, that Rian Johnson's trilogy looks like he's done. That's what John Campbell was reporting last week, and it appears the evidence for that is growing, and indeed John Campbell was right about that, and Rian Johnson, in terms of his trilogy, is finished. He may get to direct at least one of these Game of Thrones created films. We don't know that at the moment, but as far as the trilogy that Rian wanted to do, certainly up to like 2026, it looks like that's over and done with. So it's either finished or it's kicked into the really long grass. The problem, though, is what we're hearing about what Benioff and Weiss are doing with Game of Thrones. Now, I've been doing a bit of digging around to what's going on with this show, and it appears that what is upsetting most people is that the lead character, the lead heroine, if you like, lead actress in the series, who's been in it right from the very beginning, it seems like they've got to kind of like the last 2 or 3 episodes of the whole thing, and she's suddenly done a complete character about turn and gone from the hero to the villain. That's about what I can make out that's going on there. So I've never watched Game of Thrones, so I can't judge it myself. But that appears to be what's happened, that they've got to the final season, actually into the final couple of episodes of the final season, and the main character that everybody's invested in, or one of the main characters everybody's invested in, has suddenly done a complete flip and gone from like heroine to villain, or villainess, I suppose. And this is all raising alarm bells, really, with what's happened with Star Wars under Lucasfilm Limited, and also, of course, Rian Johnson, J.J. Abrams, and Kathleen Kennedy, which is that they have created a sequel trilogy without any planning, without any overall arc, and so we have got to a situation where characters are just changing on the drop of the hat. Luke Skywalker, of course, becomes Jake Skywalker. He bears no resemblance in Last Jedi to Luke Skywalker that we knew. There's no sort of storyline overarching the sequel trilogy. And what's happened on Game of Thrones is sounding alarmingly similar to me to what's happened with Star Wars so far. And that these two are coming into Star Wars, it does raise a few questions, I think, about... I mean, I was really looking forward to the trilogy that these two were going to create, because up to this point, I thought Game of Thrones was a very, very successful, well-plotted, well-scripted series, and up to... as it says, up to the last couple of series, it pretty much has been, but they've been based, apparently earlier seasons have been based on source material that they had to work with. It's only since they've had to create their own material after they ran out of sort of source material within the Game of Thrones books that things have started to go wrong. Now, they're coming into Star Wars and they're going to create a trilogy of films on their own. There's not going to be any source material to work with there. So it is all a little bit worrying. The only thing I'd say is that maybe they have rushed the final season of Game of Thrones to get onto Star Wars, and so kind of like they just had to bring the final season to a quick end. And possibly if they had more time to plan out the final season, it would have finished up sort of a better final season, if you like, bringing all of the story arches together. As I say, it's a bit of a struggle for me, this, because I never watched Game of Thrones. I'm only going by what I've read and seen on the internet, but what I'm reading, what I'm hearing, does sound rather alarmingly similar to the mess that the sequel trilogy has managed to get into. So what we really want with the next trilogy, with the Game of Thrones, Benioff and Weiss trilogy, is a well-plotted, well-scripted, well-directed, well-planned trilogy of films that has a beginning, a middle, and end, and hopefully when they start off, they know where they're going to finish up in the final film. Hopefully they'll know what story they want to tell, and they'll know how to tell it over 3 films. That's what we're hoping for. That's what we've not had from the sequel trilogy. We're hoping that this next trilogy that's coming up, starting in 2022, will have that planning and that plotting, and we'll have that overarching storyline. But what's happened with Game of Thrones, it does raise questions about these two. Like I said, I was thinking that this would reset Star Wars, if you like, after the failure. Certainly not it's not been a financial failure. It's been very successful financially for Disney, but it's been a creative failure, I think, the sequel trilogy. And I was hoping after the creative failure of the sequel trilogy, we would get to this next trilogy with Benioff and Weiss, and we will have a successful, a successfully plotted out series, that series of films, trilogy of films, that would make sense. But given what's going on with Game of Thrones, I'm a bit concerned now, I have to say. But I mean, Star Wars can't afford another sequel trilogy. Sequel trilogy has been bad enough as it is, done a lot of damage, particularly The Last Jedi has done a tremendous amount of damage to the IP of Star Wars and to the Star Wars fandom. So we really can't afford another sequel trilogy with these two. There's going to be a lot invested in this Benioff and Weiss trilogy. A lot invested in terms of financial investment from Disney, and a lot invested in terms of fan expectations. So I just hope what's happening in Game of Thrones in its final season isn't an omen. Very often final seasons do go off the rails. I remember a couple of years ago, the very successful series Dexter, which had been really popular up to the last couple of seasons, started going off the rails in its last couple of seasons. The final season was very, very divisive. So it seems to be something that does happen with long-running television series, that when they get to their last season, very often they do seem to go off the rails. I wonder whether that's just because they have to find a way to bring it to an end, and from where they've been, they don't know how to bring it to an end. That's what you need to do in successful storytelling. You need to know where you're starting, where you're going, and where you're ending. You need to know what your ending is going to be for any successful story, any successful film, series, novel. You need to know what that story is telling and where it is going to end when you begin, basically. Of course, you can go on certain tracks. You don't have to stick rigidly to your story from where you begin, to where you get to. You can go off in various tangents, but you need to know that you're going to bring it in the end to the place that you always wanted to bring that story to its conclusion, if I'm making sense. So it's a bit worrying. But as I say, a lot of successful series have gone off the rails over the years in their final seasons. So we shall just wait and see. We're not going to see anything until 2022 from Benioff and Weiss in terms of Star Wars. And let's just hope that in the intervening years between kind of like when they're going to finish with Game of Thrones, which will be very shortly, and when they released that first Star Wars film in 2022, let's just hope they sort of go at a steady pace, and they know what story they're telling, and they plot it out properly, and they know where they're going to finish up. I say Star Wars can't afford at this point another disaster, certainly creative disaster like the sequel trilogy. But again, as far as Rian Johnson is concerned, this very much what further from Bob Iger is backing up what John Campea was reporting, which is that it really does look as though Rian Johnson's trilogy is done. That's not happening anytime soon. And whilst Rian may get some sort of involvement within the Benioff and Weiss trilogy, really does look as though Rian Johnson's trilogy is done. Right, we'll be back with more Star Wars content very, very soon. Please like, share and subscribe. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.